Story from Suffolk. The story of. It's called The Dauntless Girl. No, Dauntless Girl doesn't really sound. At first reading it doesn't sound particularly complimentary, but The Dauntless Girl actually means a woman without fear. So maybe if she was a man, she would be brave, but it is. It's quite a well-known story actually. It's a story about a lady called Mary. Some time ago, Mary was working as servant to a farmer, and the farmer was sitting one evening with his friend. I think his friend's a blacksmith, and another friend, and they're sitting around and they're drinking a bottle of whiskey, and they get to the very bottom of the bottle, and the farmer says, "I'll send Mary down to the pub and she'll buy another bottle of whiskey." And the farmer's friends looked at him and said, "What, in the dark, on her own? She'll walk to the village, she'll walk past the churchyard, and she'll buy things like that don't bother Mary. She's afraid of nothing. She'll do it." So Mary duly walked to the village, walked to the pub, bought a bottle of whiskey, and brought it back for the farmer and his friends. And they carried on drinking a little longer, as you do. And the blacksmith said to the farmer, "Well, what is it Mary wouldn't do?" And so, because they'd been drinking and because it was late at night, a bet was made that they could find something Mary would be afraid to do. And the something they came up with was to go to the churchyard, go into the bone house, and bring back a skull. The blacksmith wanted to make sure that he would win his bet and wanted to make sure that he could scare Mary, the Dauntless Girl. So he spoke to the vicar and he borrowed the key to the bone house. And he spoke to the sexton and he said, "Next Friday night, hide in the bone house. Make sure you're in there just before midnight. And a young woman will come in. And I want you to pretend to be a ghost." And the sexton looked at the blacksmith and said, "I'm not hiding in the bone house at midnight." And so the sexton produced a golden guinea. And the sexton looked at the guinea, and of course the gold glinted. And he thought, a whole guinea. A whole guinea. So the next Friday, just before midnight, the sexton unlocked the door and hid himself in the corner of the bone house. And he was hiding there in the corner when Mary, our dauntless girl, opened the door and let herself in. And she went to pick up one of the skulls. And the sexton saw her and did, as he had agreed with the blacksmith, and called out, "Put that skull down, that skull belongs to my father." So Mary put the skull down and picked up another one. And the sexton called out from his hiding place in the corner, "Put that skull down, that skull belongs to my mother." And the Dauntless girl put the skull down and picked up a third one. And the sexton called out from the corner, "Put that skull down, that skull belongs to my brother." And Mary by now was starting to lose patience, and she said, "Father, mother, brother, I care not. I need a skull. The farmer I work for has said he needs a skull." So she picked up the skull, walked out of the bone house, and marched back up to the farm. So she got there and presented the skull to the three men, the farmer, the blacksmith, and the other man. And they said, "Well, did nothing happen? Were you not scared?" Mary said, "Oh, there was an old ghost in there, and he said I couldn't take the skull because it belonged to his father. Then he said I couldn't take a skull because it belonged to his mother. Then he said I couldn't take a skull because it belonged to his brother. So I just told him to shut up and took the skull and walked up here with it." So the sexton, in some versions of this story, the sexton dies of fright. In some versions, he just spends a long cold night in the bone house. I think you can choose which of those you prefer. So word of this got round the village, and the local squire heard of this and thought, "She sounds like the kind of woman who should be working for me." So he approached Mary, and of course he offered her more money than the farmer was paying. So she moved into the big house and went to work for the squire. The squire said to her, "I gather, Mary, you're not afraid of ghosts." She said, "Afraid of ghosts? I just tell ghosts what I think of them." And the squire nodded and he said, my mother passed away some time ago, but she still likes to drop into the house. Just to keep an eye on things." So Mary nodded, and every time she laid a place for the squire at the table, she laid a place for the mother as well, making sure not to cross the knife and the fork, because if you cross the knife and the fork, it will stop unwanted guests from appearing. So sometimes the old lady would appear, and Mary would just have a chat with her, and after a while she sort of got used to the company. But there came a time when the squire had to go, some people say it was London. I think perhaps it was Ipswich. That's far enough for a country squire to travel on legal business. So Mary was left there on her own, tending the house. And it was then that the squire's mother really appeared to her. And the squire's mother said, "Come down to the cellar. I have something to show you." So Mary followed the old lady down the cellar steps, through the cellar, into a corner of the cellar, and there on the floor was a loose tile. So Mary lifted up the loose tile, and there, under the loose tile, were 2 bags of gold. There was one large bag of gold, and there was one small bag of gold. And the old lady's ghost said to Mary, "The large bag of gold is for my son, and the small bag of gold is for you." So Mary nodded and left the 2 bags of gold where they were, but managed to blunder her way up the steps again in the dark. When the squire returned, Mary said to him, I have something to show you. I have something to show you. Yeah. And the two of them went down into the cellar, and Mary prized up the loose tile in the corner, and she showed the squire the 2 bags of gold, and she said, your mother showed these to me, and your mother said that the large bag of gold is for me, and the small bag of gold is for you. So they carried the 2 bags of gold up the steps. And after that, whenever Mary laid the table, she made sure that she crossed the fork and the knife. And the old lady never appeared again. But the squire began to look at Mary in a different light, and he began to think. He was an unmarried gentleman at this time. He began to think, she's a good-looking lass in her own way. Good-looking. And she's afraid of nothing. So, after a little while, the squire married Mary, the Dauntless girl. So he did actually get, well, at least one hand on the big bag of gold. So I think his mother really did get her wish. And it goes to show what you can achieve if you're not really afraid of things. And if you listen to what elderly ladies tell you. My name's Fiona, I'm a storyteller. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, there are lots of other stories, and certainly quite a lot of Suffolk stories on my channel. Please do subscribe, and I do hope to see you again soon. And in the meantime, if ever you find a bag of gold in your cellar, please do give a little bit of it to me, because it was my idea for you to look in the cellar, really, wasn't it? See you soon.